Hello, I'm Kaiser and welcome to Moose Reads. Before I get started, I want to say that the opinions that I give here are my own opinions. They are extremely subjective. If I dislike a book, it is not a reflection on the author and it is not a reflection on people who do like it. Different people have different tastes, and that's okay. Today, I will be reviewing Nettle Bone by T. Kingfisher. It is a fantasy novel. The description says, Mara, a shy, convent-raised third-born daughter, is relieved not to be married off for the sake of her parents' throne. Her older sister wasn't so fortunate, though, and her royal husband is as abusive as he is powerful. From the safety of the convent, Mara wonders who will come to her sister's rescue and put a stop to this. But after years of watching their families and kingdoms pretend all is well, Mara realizes if any hero is coming, it will have to be Mara herself. If Mara can complete 3 impossible tasks, a witch will grant her the tools she needs. But as is the way in stories of princes and the impossible, these tasks are only the beginning of Mara's strange and enchanting journey to save her sister and topple a throne. 4 stars. Content warnings for this book include domestic abuse, miscarriage, and infant mortality. I picked this up more or less on a whim. It was on sale for like $2, and I've enjoyed every T. Kingfisher book I've read so far, so I figured I might as well. This isn't entirely the best logic, because I'm pretty sure like half of T. Kingfisher's work is technically horror, and I don't do horror outside of 1.5 very specific exceptions. But Nettle Bone falls on the fantasy end of the spectrum, so I figured it would be fine. I loved this. It's not necessarily one I'll be rereading over and over again, but I enjoyed reading it, and I will probably read it at least one more time in the future. This very much began feeling like an old-school fairy tale. Mara has 3 impossible tasks she has to complete in order to earn the tools to overthrow an evil king and save her sisters. Once she completes those tasks, she has to go on a quest to reach said king, picking up various allies along the way. The second half starts to feel a little more grounded. It's concerned with more of the nitty-gritty details of how one assassinates a king, so it feels a little less fairy tale and a little more like a regular sort of story. It's still every bit as engaging, it just gives off a somewhat different vibe. There were parts that were fairly predictable, but also places where I made predictions that proved wrong, so I'd say it's pretty good on that front too. This book does make pretty heavy use of flashbacks, though, which somewhat muddies the exact timeline of events. The book starts with Mara working on the second impossible task, then immediately jumps back to explaining how Mara got to that point. Even going through the background, I'm pretty sure the sequence of events is non-linear. It works, in my opinion, but I know this is the kind of thing that some people hate and some people have trouble following. If it's not your thing, this probably isn't a book for you. That's all I have to say without spoilers. If you don't like spoilers, now is the time to pause or close the video. For everyone else, let's talk details. I'm a little bit iffy on the witch that assigns Mara the impossible tasks. When Mara comes back after completing the second task, she fudges the third one for her while admitting that the reason she assigned the tasks is because she didn't want to help Mara and she thought she couldn't do them. The deal was 3 impossible tasks in exchange for the means to kill the king, which she does arguably get. However, largely the witch is just stumbling along, the same as Mara. She doesn't have any idea how they can kill a king, she's entirely winging it. It seems a little unfair to me, but they do succeed, so technically she wasn't lying. At some point, Mara's sister has a baby girl and Mara attends her christening. At this point, we get introduced to 2 things. First, we find out that all the rulers of the Northern Kingdom, where her sister lives, age poorly and die young. Then, we get to hear the blessing that the fairy godmother gives to every royal child in the kingdom. I'm not going to hunt down the exact wording, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that her so-called blessing was killing the monarchs. In theory, it's a trade-off. Sure, they die a little faster, but the kingdom cannot be harmed by any external magic. I honestly thought that bit was going to be significant. They can't be harmed by external magic, so obviously it'll have to be native magic that kills him, right? After she does her impossible tasks, the witch takes Mara to the goblin market, where they use a moth to find something that Mara needs. In this case, it ends up being a man, and I thought for sure that fairy magics had worked some time shenanigans and he was some long-lost prince or king of the Northern Kingdom. Thus, he could do a murder and get around the godmother's blessing. But no, not only is Wolf not any such thing, the external magic bit is really just there to ensure that neither the Dust Witch nor Mara's fairy godmother can use magic right out. There was a bit in the middle-ish of this book that really bothered me. When they get to the Northern Kingdom, they can't just waltz up to the castle and kill the king, so they need to find a place to stay while they make a plan. They take lodgings with a woman who, as a child, loved a toy to the point of worship, which gave the toy, a wooden puppet, life. It's been abusing her ever since, and Mara wants to free her from it, but the Dust Witch says that she'll let the woman decide. The woman is still devoted to her beloved toy, however, so they leave her to be abused by it when they get on with the regicide. This is one of those awkward plots that I don't know how to handle. On the one hand, I'm glad the woman was allowed to make the choice for herself. On the other hand, I don't like that we leave her living with abuse, and there's no other resolution. I'm pretty sure this is some sort of metaphor for people who are unwilling to leave their abusers, but I don't think it says anything worthwhile in the way it's presented. Either way, it's one of two things that the book left in a way that felt unresolved. The other one came at the beginning. Mara's second task is to make a dog out of bones in a place called the Blighted Lands. According to Mara, the Blighted Lands were once just normal lands, but then a very bad famine happened and eventually the residents were forced into cannibalism. In retribution for this heinous act, the gods punished both the people and the land with a curse. The people are all a little insane, and the land is more or less dead. Mara meets some of the people there who are kind to her and warn her to be careful because some of the others are more violent than they. Mara makes a point more than once that the people aren't really to blame. Circumstances forced them to choose between something terrible and death, and then they were punished for not dying. And still, they are largely decent people. Like the puppet, I think this is probably meant to convey something about life, but it doesn't do it well, so it feels meaningless. So by the end, it too is just a horrible circumstance that will continue to punish people who don't really deserve it. I'm sure this is very subjective, but for me, if a book is going to spend as much time as it does with these two horrible circumstances, I'd like the story to bring some kind of resolution. Aside from those two things, though, I did really enjoy this book and would highly recommend it. That's all I have to say about Nettle and Bone. If you liked this video, I hope you watch more in the future. Thanks for watching this one. Bye!